Hi, I'm Gretchen Lida. Welcome to HN Reads on Horse Network, the monthly show where we bring on an author to talk about their horse-related book. This month, I am so excited. It's January 2021. 2020 is behind us, thank goodness. And today we have Sarah Maslin Nir. Sarah Maslin Nir is one heck of a writer. She was a Pulitzer Prize finalist. She's a New York Times reporter, and she's the newest author of this fantastic book, Horse Crazy, The Love of a Woman and a World in Love with a Horse. Sarah Maslin Nir is going to introduce our video for us, which I think you guys will like.
Hi, thank you, Gretchen. I so appreciate it. I love your enthusiasm. I wish I was as optimistic about 2021 being off to a pretty shitty start. So,
right.
All endeavor to make it better. That's
right.
Our obligation.
So true, right?
Fortunately, Gretchen horses make everything better. So I'm super happy to participate in this as a distraction, as a balm for these times, because they are for me and for so many of us. But yes, I was thinking that I would read from my book, Horse Crazy, which you spoke so kindly about. But I thought it might be better if my horse and I read from my book, which will show a little video of exactly that, the introduction, if you have 5 minutes to spare.
We have it queued up and ready to go.
Okay, so now we're going to hope technology works, and we're going to bated breath. Yes, it's happening.
Yes.
Go, Liz. All right. Uh-oh. Liz, the sound. We had it so well before.
Right? It was so close.
Practice this.
So cute.
Nope. Liz?
While she tries one more time, you have to tell us the horse's name.
Okay, the horse's name is Stellar. And I suggest, Liz, you are producing this. You deserve to be off the background. Come up to the front. I think that might be the solution. If you're pop your little face on this screen with us, I think that'll work.
Hands.
Liz, behind the scenes no more.
Let's try this.
Try one more time. So close. All right, go.
My name is Sarah Maslin Nir, and I'm the author of Horse Crazy. This is Stellar Maslin Nir, and we are going to read a little bit from my upcoming book. I hope you enjoy. In the decade I've worked for the New York Times, I've reported across the country and around the world. And as soon as I file each story, I do one thing before I head home. I search for the horses. The rider in me wants to gaze at them, stroke them, gallop with them. But the reporter in me has only one goal: to know their stories. And so I found myself, notebook in hand, interviewing the keepers of the street horses of Senegal, West Africa, as the animals slept in corrals of parked cars. I've traced the Viking history of the Canadian Norwegian fjord horse, who extracted us both from a peat bog in the Scottish Highlands. And I've quizzed Indian soldiers about the indigenous battle horses I charged through a quarry in Rajasthan. For my entire life, I've sought out horses endlessly, even in the urban world in which I grew up. As a girl, I found them on the Upper West Side, in a barn disguised as an old townhouse. I found them underneath the Triborough Bridge in Harlem and stampeding through Central Park. And yet all this time, I never asked myself why. Why do I love horses? That's because the answer has always been, because horses. It's a response that anybody who has ever felt the ineluctable tug of their big amber eyes, in which you see something much more than your own reflection, or who knows the peace of their shattering wildness, immediately understands. Because horses answer enough. But while to me horses feel like an inevitability, a part of my body and my life in a way I don't question any more than I would the rise and fall of my own chest. Hey, Stella? In fact, why is the sum total of my job description as a journalist? So it was only a matter of time before I turned the query on myself. That quest became this book, and it expanded far beyond just me, because I'm not alone. As I sought out the horses, I found they're human. The two teen sisters who bought a wild pony only to set her forever free. The executive who left corporate America for a life patrolling Central Park as a mounted ranger. The Pennsylvania man who ran an equine version of the FBI. And the fox hunter who galloped away from a crumbling marriage. And the diplomat's daughter who wanted forbidden horses so badly, she smuggled their semen across the sea. Horses lend themselves to stories. I once wrote that in the New York Times. In the United States in particular, horses, their manes streaming, their nostrils flaring, hooves thudding, carry with them something of our projected national psyche. There are over 9 million horses in America, far more than even when they were our only way to get around. They're not necessary at all, yet for some, they seem more so. Here, they are the furls of the American flag in equid form, imbued with our narratives of national identity. They carry on their backs the tales we tell ourselves about who we are, about who I am. When I finally asked myself why the search grew epic, I dug for the reason in the belly of a 747, huddling with a trio of Dutch warm bloods as we crossed the Atlantic in the cargo hold. I looked for it floating in the dawn waters off the coast of Virginia as all around me, ponies swam in the salt. I sought it underneath their thick lips, and I listened to it in the syncopation of their 7-league strides, in the science behind their piano key teeth, and the music of their bugling whinnies. Their theories. A horse's stride replicates an essential rhythm we all felt for those first 9 months of our lives, rocking in amniotic fluid as our mother went about the world. Another posits power. Horses lend us their own, extend our feeble human legs with their muscled limbs. They allow us to tap into their strength and seize it as ours, to feel speed and might far beyond our capacity, to touch something close to the infinite. On my own 2 legs, I'm just Sarah. Lent 4 more, I'm formidable. Both theories seem right, yet both don't come close to capturing what it feels when a horse snuffles my palm, or graces me with a perfect jump, or simply stands still in a paddock in beauty that hurts. At last, I realized that the only one capable of answering my question would be those who know me best in the world, the horses themselves. Horse Crazy is structured around the lifelong dialogue I've had with these animals. Each chapter is named after a horse who told me its story or helped me to write my own. I don't believe that riding a horse is a dance, as some may say, with a partner who enjoys the experience the same way I do. Instead, I believe it is a conversation, an intimate dialogue between a creature that over the millennia has become a perfect foil and partner to humankind and to me. I realize I've been having that conversation all my life. In Horse Crazy, I'll tell you what I've heard.
Thanks, Liz.
Thanks, Liz.
Thank
and
you.
thanks, Sarah, for sharing that. It was so cute and it's so nice. Like the horses with it just really make that video come alive.
Can you tell that I feed that horse too many treats? That is one spoiled, rotten horse.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't super mouthy though. Like he was super polite about it. He's like,
He's like, you're here. There has to be a reason. It can't just be to read to me. It must be bestowed on me.
Right. This is not your job. I'm sorry.
So that's the intro of the book, and that's the gist. It's a real journey, which you've gone on with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been quite. I know. I remember when we first talked in August. A lot has happened in the world since August.
Just a little.
Like it has been quite the experience. I guess I'll ask that question first since we're talking about it. What has it been like having a book come out and being a New York Times reporter and being a horse girl in those since the book came out since August?
Yeah, so it's been really interesting. It was very, very crushing that my entire book tour got canceled. I'll tell you a secret, Gretchen. I had planned to have a party at a bar in New York City where I'm from and where I am right now called the White Horse, obviously. It's a very famous literary bar. Dylan Thomas wrote his works there. And I had even worked out with the community board to have a horse at the party. Yeah, I'm on the board of a therapeutic riding organization called Gallop NYC, which is very important to me. And I was going to have a therapy pony as an ambassador for them and do information. And I had met with the community and it was all done and dusted. And then the pandemic happened. But look, in the long grand scheme of things, many, many more important things have been canceled than a book tour. But what's been really nice, I have sort of salvaged it with doing little private readings at people's farms, outdoors, socially distant in the paddocks. And actually, I invite anyone listening to this to reach out to me and invite me to do my book tour in your fields or in your riding arenas. I'm happy to come to you. They can find me at my Instagram, which is Horse Crazy the Book. or they can email me at horsecrazythebook@gmail.com. And that's been really redeeming, meeting with horse people who've been moved by the book around really the East Coast. I haven't gone too much around the country, and getting to meet their horses too. So it's been a silver lining to this coming out with a book in a pandemic situation.
Yeah, that's amazing. Also, you're probably one of the few authors that would bring the right shoes.
Right. That's a great point.
Yeah, no, you've talked to lots and lots of different people, and you've been on lots of podcasts, and you've been on everything from, like, I've heard you on the Daily, the New York Times podcast. I've heard you on Horse in the Morning. And one of the things that I think is super interesting about you is your ability to switch in and out of the languages of both horse people and, laymen or writers or other types of people. Can you describe what that's like? What is that skill? What is it? Where did you learn that? What is that like?
That's a really smart observation, Gretchen, because it is easy as being an insider in an insular sport to write in a way that isolates other people from accessing it. And often the sport makes a lot of people feel excluded, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. I appreciate Amanda Latif. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. She's from Calgary. She just wrote that I write eloquently, and that's the highest praise for a writer. So thank you so much. But navigating being accessible while writing about something very particular and insular is hard. But as a journalist, I often am writing about things I don't understand. Everybody, it's so funny. They're like, oh, you're from the Times. So they start speaking in highfalutin words, or like a tort law specialist, and they'll start talking like, I didn't go to law school. Like, the reason why I can write about stuff is I go like, hold on a second. What does that word mean? Like, wait. And I often, one of the things I use in journalism, a technique in interviewing, is I say to people, okay, explain it to me like you would a 5-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes sure you don't miss anything. Or I say to people, talk to me about this like you would tell your best friend the day after it happened at a bar. So it's plain language. And I'm really glad that you said that I was able to do that in the book, because I that was very intentional. A lot of what I write about in the book is about feeling excluded or not an intrinsic part of this world I was so obsessed with, because of my upbringing, my background. I'm the daughter of an immigrant. I'm a Jew from New York City. My father was a Holocaust survivor, and I really struggled with this idea that this elite sport was for some other type of person, for Jackie Kennedys of the world, not this scrappy up-and-coming family. And so making the book itself accessible in the way that I tried to make the riding world accessible is sort of a parallel. One of the chapters in the book, I'm sorry if I'm going here and there, but it makes sense to me, is about Breyer horse enthusiasts. I can't even say it. Breyer horse enthusiasts. So there is a whole world. I see you have a little Breyer on your shelf behind you. Is that?
These over here. Yep, this one.
So that's a Breyer model horse. They were my singular obsession when I was a kid. And it turns out there are people who travel around the country with suitcases of plastic model horses and compete them in live horse shows. They're not competing like dioramas they made or models they produced. They're competing store-bought plastic horses against the same horses. And I included them in my book about horse crazies. These are people who maybe haven't been able to access a horse. So they're financially inaccessible for so many. And yet they tap into what a horse means, right? That a horse takes your soul somewhere. A horse is whimsical and allows you to play even as an adult. And so I included a chapter on plastic model horse competitors because I believe that they're horse crazies too, with the same legitimacy as you or I.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the interesting thing is that BreyerFest was online this year, and they had a stellar turnout.
Yeah,
like supposedly they had tons, and it was still like you still had to pay to go, like it wasn't free, and there's still people attended in droves.
30,000 people.
Yeah, it was crazy.
And I in the book I talk about walking into that 4-H arena full of adults playing with plastic horses, kind of in violation of journalistic tenets, which require curiosity and open-mindedness. I walked in and being like, weirdos, almost. And by the end, I envied them that they really were embracing what a horse can do for a person, which is just fill them with joy and allow them to tap into something bigger than themselves. And I will show you. I was reporting on the coronavirus when the first outbreak in New York State. I was the first person on the ground in the city of New Rochelle, and I spent 2 weeks there before we knew anything about the virus. And wouldn't you know, I got the virus really early on. And Breyer heard that I was sick. And so when I met with them, I jokingly said to them, I have a perfect model for your next Breyer. His name is Trendsetter. He's my heart horse. Everybody's going to want a Trendsetter. And they were like, haha. But they sent me Trendsetter. It's an exact replica of him, down to his star. Everything.
Gosh.
Modeled off a picture that I had emailed them as a joke, like, why don't you make a Trendsetter? So they did when I was sick.
Oh my gosh. Are the proportions correct and everything?
It's exactly how he's standing in the photo. And if you go on my Instagram, Horse Crazy, the book, you can see the picture of Trendsetter that this is modeled after. I mean, it is to the exact, but it is my treasure.
Oh my gosh. No, that's a treasure. That's one of those, like, my Breyers often get super dusty. I still have a couple in my apartment. Most of them are black in place. But I have this one that I had friends that worked for the Arabian Horse Association, and it's a white Breyer stallion of an Arabian, because they would always hear people talk about their white Arabian stallions. So they told me for my birthday they'd bring me one home.
That's what we got.
Yeah, so that's what I got, is the white one in the closet.
You want a real
Before I forget, I also wanted to mention to our audience, we would love to have you ask questions. So if you have any questions, don't forget to put them in the Facebook comments or on the YouTube comments. We have people watching for them, and we will see them, and we would love to answer them.
Yeah, I see Susan Gunsully has a question. She says, love your book. Thanks, Susan. Will I come out with a sequel? And actually, I am working not on a sequel to Horse Crazy, but I have been working with Monty Roberts on possibly crafting some of his next work. He's 85. He's the legendary horse whisperer. He's a chapter in my book about him. Or the man who listens to horses, rather. And he wants to figure out, what will be the final book of his legacy. So I flew over to his farm, Flag is Up Farms in Solvang, California, and spent the weekend with him working on Monty's next project collaboratively. So that's a top secret. I haven't said that to anyone. How do you all know?
Well, we'll just keep it secret. So we have a couple pictures too of Monty Roberts holding your book and you talking to him. You put it on your Instagram.
Yeah, maybe we'll share them.
You can pull up. What's it like working with Monty Roberts?
He's really fascinating. I write in the book. Yeah, that was me working on Monty's book at his. You see in the back there his foundation. He had veterans come for the weekend. A symposium called Horses and Healing, and they learn how to quiet that. He calls it a post-traumatic injury syndrome. He doesn't call it post-traumatic stress disorder. He calls it post-traumatic injury by learning how to be still with horses. But Monty's a fascinating guy. He is very committed to nonviolence. He actually, I wouldn't say he's a horse trainer. He's a nonviolence evangelist, and his modality is horses. Monty often says, I think this is the right number, he had 72 broken bones before he turned 13, all at the hands of his father, who beat him just as he beat horses. And Monty's revolutionary principles of gentling horses rather than breaking them, which is now, thanks to him, the predominant way that we start horses, were really because he promised his horse Brownie when he was a little boy, I'll never let my father hurt you the way he did me. And when you understand Monty from that perspective, rather than a horse trainer, as a evangelist for nonviolence, I think he becomes a much more powerful figure. And I think his legacy will be really lasting, because it's not about making a pony do a thing you want it to do at all.
That's beautiful. I keep thinking about, I wonder, do you think you talk a lot about in your book, and you even mentioned it earlier, that feeling of feeling disconnected and as an outsider. And I know that a lot of the times when we talk about things like abuse, the experience of many who have been abused is that of being isolated. Do you think you two connected over that kind of sensation, or?
Absolutely. Well, so in my book, one of the chapters where Monty appears is called Benediction, which is the name of one of his deer, because Monty has moved on from horses in a way, and gentles wild deer, which are untamable, but they follow Monty around his property. I went there. There are 40 of them in his yard. And these aren't pet deer or tame deer. They are wild deer that decide that Monty, as he says, horses require one thing, that we are their safe place to be. And so Monty has become these deer's safe place to be. But Monty helped me understand about 10 years ago on Thanksgiving Day, I was the victim of a robbery where a man climbed in my window in New York City when I was sleeping and stabbed me while I was in bed. And after that, I developed a post-traumatic stress disorder called hypervigilance, which you hear everything because you're constantly listening for the next bad thing to happen to you, right? You're on guard. And so you can't tune anything out. And in order to walk around the world, especially New York City, you have to be able to tune out the sound of an air conditioner buzzing on the wall next to you, right? It's a white noise, but it stopped being a white noise for me. And Monty helped me understand that that's how the prey creature lives all the time. And the horse is the ultimate prey creature. And I had become this prey creature. And navigating my path back to normalcy was really realizing that unlike these horses that were such a solace to me because they communicate in silence, and silence is what I needed to feel safe, they don't have a choice. And I had a choice whether or not I could live as a prey creature. And it wasn't a choice to be made for me by, as I describe in the book, a stranger in the dark. But Monty and I really connected because he told me I was prey. My whole childhood, I was prey to my father. And so we really connected. Even before we met, he said to me on his radio show, he's like, I have never felt so connected to someone I have never met in my life. And I was like, me too, Monty. I love you so much.
Wow, that's so lovely. You know that chapter, you included that chapter later, right?
You're exactly right. Did you get an advanced galley, Gretchen, or you got a hard copy?
I have the galley and I have the advanced copy.
Oh, wow. So you will find it is not in your advanced galley. Just for the people who are not book nerds, advanced galley is what you send out to reviewers like Gretchen, advance of the book to give them a sneak peek and see if they want to review it. She kindly did. And I realized that I had left that chapter out. I think subconsciously, look, I'm the daughter of a psychiatrist and a psychologist, so I have to analyze everything I do. I think subconsciously I wanted to create a life where that had never happened to me. And Horse Crazy is memoiristic. It's not my full life, but it's my life through horses. And if I didn't include it, I think my body was saying that maybe it never happened, and you didn't have to live through that. And I realized, memoir has really one requirement, good memoir, is that it's true. People can always see through when you're padding something or softening a blow. And I realized it had to be in there because it's true and it really happened.
I did not think I was going to be asking this, but there's some really nasty falls in the book and you get really hurt. Like what is the difference between in your brain and in your mind between those falls and what happened to you that Thanksgiving Eve?
Well, that's so interesting. My farrier, his daughters are very big professional riders. And he says all the time to us, he makes a joke. I tell my girls, if a man did what their horses do to them every day, you kick them to the curb. And, they're like, good boy, he didn't mean it, to their horses. But that's it, Gretchen. It's that there's no intentionality in a horse, stumbling and crushing, nearly crushing you as mine did, or, crashing through a jump or putting a foot wrong. My trainer, Leah Epstein, she often says that when we ascribe human emotions to horses, it's when we get them all wrong. Someone will say, well, he's mad at me, or he doesn't like that, or he did that because he hates me, or even if he pinned his ears and tried to bite you, oh, he's a bad, or they don't feel anger in the same way we do. They don't hold grudges. And I think the horse's very hoarseness is what absolves them from culpability.
Mhm.
I don't blame any horse for ever wounding me, and yet I certainly bear the scars. You can't see, but the way I'm sitting now is to protect my back. I write in the book, I'm always at a 6 on the pain scale. I'm in pain right now. It's become a part of my life because of my injuries on horses. But the pain of not riding is greater.
Mhm. Yeah, that's beautiful. Also, I remember I talked to Janet Jones, who's a horse neurobiologist. I'm probably totally butchering her title. And she was talking a lot about how horses do exactly what you're saying. They do not add to that. They don't have the motives or the preconceived things that we think they do, and you can never prescribe them those.
Well, it's so interesting, but I get caught up in it. Like my horse Astro is very grumpy.
Mhm.
He's a grumpy dude, and he's lovely to ride, but he's just kind of like a pushy guy.
Mhm.
And in the winter he's a little spicy, right? So instead of thinking this is a cooped up horse that is manifesting his kinetic energy, his potential energy has to become kinetic, just has to go somewhere. I started thinking he's trying to hurt me. Like when he throws a buck, this is a grumpy horse trying to hurt me. And of course, none of that is true. And when I started reframing Astro as this is a cooped up horse that needs to get his jollies out, rather than then I had such a better experience with him. And actually, now I pet him on the nose and I say, "Oh, you're going to release the kraken today?" I think that reframing that ends up creating a more I don't want to say a better relationship with your horse, but a more horse relationship with your horse, right? I say in the book, we often talk to our horses in the barn, right? Oh, good boy. Horses don't speak to each other ever. You're not speaking in horse. And so relating to them with human emotions is not relating to them in horse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the other questions that I had that was similar to this strain is I've been wondering what the daily life of Sarah Maslin Nir is like, because it's clear that you get to the barn quite a bit, but I also know that you're a busy New York Times reporter. We have a really great picture of you riding side saddle recently too.
Oh, yeah. Well, so with COVID, I have had a little more time to ride because I'm not commuting into the office. This is me and my dog riding side saddle. I'm on what I call an equestrian rumspringa, which is what the Amish do before they settle down. They're allowed to wild out for a year. And actually, I was getting a little ring bound in my head, a little bit too much obsessed with perfecting, the perfect hunter jump. And my trainer said, "Get out of the ring. You won't be." Okay, I wasn't frightened to jump. I was frightened to make a mistake. And she's like, "Go jump over some stone walls and mess around." So I've been on this equestrian rumspringa. I did fox hunting. I rode Clydesdales. Maybe we want to show the Clydesdale picture.
Yeah,
that's pretty nuts. That's a 19 and a half hand Clydesdale.
Gosh,
huge. And I'm 5'8", so that's a big old guy. I've been trying all sorts of new things. But the day in the life. I ride 3 days a week, which, as an amateur, you're never going to be as good as you want to be riding one horse 3 days a week. I've made my peace with that, right? My experiences, I'm not as good as I was when I was a kid, when I could ride all the time, and when I bounced when I fell. But I'm having a richer experience of it. Then I hustle for the New York Times. A lot of people think a reporter, our stories are assigned to us, but they're not. You're in charge of self-generation. So a tremendous amount of time is spent cultivating sources, finding stories, pitching them, and then writing them. I mean, right now the news is writing itself because we're living in such dynamic, explosive times. With COVID, always something happening to cover, and with what's happening politically, I'm going to be going to the inauguration to cover it next week as well, which will be intense. But I volunteered. It's something that I think is very important to shine a light for the public on. I feel, they say that the Grinch's heart grew 10 times the size. That Dr. Seuss thing, and Seuss heart. The more love and stuff you fill your life with, the bigger it can be. If you're like, how do you find the time for it? And there's a famous, I think it's Mark Twain quote. He says, sorry for writing so long. I would have written a briefer letter if I had more time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Doing less in some ways makes your life small. So I squeeze it in because it all matters very much to me.
Mm-hmm. And you've had like quite the year. Like you've covered everything. Like it's been something. Like you've had COVID yourself. You've covered protest. You're one of the first ones to cover the Central Park Karen.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to the inauguration. What has horses done for your writing? Has it changed? Does it help? Does it hurt? Like I know that when I take lessons, because writing is one of the only things I found that actually only physical activity that makes it easier to write.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a biographer of Trump. He's actually the person who put the idea in my head that I read in that reading. It's just in the introduction. He is a very, very type A person. He says, he actually told this to my colleague, Michael Barbaro, who edits The Daily. And Barbaro called me up, produces The Daily. And Barbaro called me up after his interview. He's like, I just had this interview and this guy said became a horse guy, this Trump biographer. And he said, the only thing that stills his mind is being on the back of a horse. And he thinks because it replicates the rocking in the womb. I mean, think, when are you rocked as an adult? Like, who rocks you? Nobody.
Right.
For 9 months, we were all rocked, which is why everybody loves that swaying motion, why it's so soothing. And the horse really replicates that. So that is interesting what you say. You're not alone in that some people feel it stills your mind to improve your writing. But the original question was, how does it inform my journalism? Well, for a very long time, I kept it totally secret that I was a horse girl. I only came out 2 years ago, so to speak, when I pitched and sold this book. And I remember saying to my good friend, author Musa Okwanga, I said, I'm worried I'll be dismissed. That's why I've never said so much of my mind is consumed with ponies, is because I was very concerned I wouldn't be taken as a credible journalist for all this really hard stuff I cover. And Musa said to me, Sarah, passion translates. That's all that matters. That's all people need to read. It's passion. It's not the subject. It's how you feel about it. And so that began my coming out. And subsequently, I've used my equestrian background to inform my journalism, namely in my 2 exposés, one building off some initial reporting by the Chronicle of the Horse into Jimmy Williams, who was a luminary in the horse world who had died, and a vaunted equestrian and also a pedophile. And he was aided and abetted by all the people around him for his long career, and ended up preying on many of his students, including the Olympian Ann Krasinski. And I was the right reporter to go deeper and expose that story. Writing that story led me to write a subsequent expose on George Morris. George Morris was the Olympic chef de keep, one of the most important living horsemen. And he also preyed on young boys for many years. He raped a number of them. And my reporting led to his lifetime ban from the United States Equestrian Federation, my expose on him. And actually, the course of my reporting ended up shaking the leaves that ended up with the ban. And many people asked me, he was such a beloved figure, or people were intimidated by him because he's quite a surly dude. And they said to me, many people were angry that George was exposed. And there was a very loud outcry, which was just devastating for the young men, or now they're old men, but the men he raped as boys. Imagine you're a victim and people are saying, well, the guy trains horses great. We should respect that. So it was really devastating for my sources. And people asked me, why did you write this expose about the star of our sport? How could you do that to this thing you love? And my response was, it's because I love it. Mm-hmm. I love the sport so much that I and all of us should demand it be its best self. And aiding and abetting and protecting a pedophile who rides horses well is not the best we can be. So ultimately, my equestrian passion informed my journalism, and I hope helped bring the sport to a better place.
Yeah, it goes into I heard some preacher at some point in my life say that, like, you have to treat, the things you love as you would treat your loved ones. You don't just, pat them when they're good. You also call them out when they're misbehaving.
Yeah.
And that is also a part of love.
Yep, exactly. Do you have any questions? Does anybody? Let's get some comments. We've got some nice people hanging out in the comments. I'm a journalist. I ask all the questions. I need to be asked some by these audience members.
While they're hopefully typing, I was curious about what do you think that the horse world will be like post-pandemic?
Well, that's interesting. There's this big movement for it to be more cheaper, that to get rid of fees and whatnot. Certainly with there are many people who are wealthy enough in our sport to be insulated from it. But if our sport wants to thrive and continue, and I say our sport, I mean all disciplines, it has to open its doors. And certainly with the financial hit everyone's taken, if it wants to survive, I think it would be well advised to listen up to these people who say, make an outreach show, lower some bars to entry, financial bars to entry, stop tacking on crazy fees to everything. So I think that will be a COVID impact. But, this summer has been about more than COVID. We've had a tremendous number of these really eye-opening Black Lives protests. And I think that will impact the sport. One of the chapters of my book is about the erased legacy of the Black cowboy. 1 in 4 cowboys in the American West were Black. And they've been totally erased by the people who write history, who are white. Because as the really powerful historian William Loren Katz, who was one of the first people to write about Black cowboys in an academic way, also a Jew from New York, he said, if Black people entered the American story, they entered under a whip and in chains. And that's not the America we wanted to remember. And so the contribution of these Black cowboys to really the American origin story, which, I'm daughter of an immigrant, but the cowboy story is my identity, right? That we're pioneers just like them. They've been removed. And actually, I didn't include this in the book, but I'm going to tell you something. The first winner of the first ever Kentucky Derby was a Black jockey. And the trainer of that horse was a freed slave. I'd love a poll of who's listening, whoever heard that. We go onto a plantation and we talk about them reckoning with their past, but the horse riding world, the early days of horse racing, people ran the horses they owned with the humans they owned on their backs. Mm-hmm. And the thoroughbred world has never reckoned with its past. I relate this now that Black Lives Matter has caused a moment of reckoning in the horse world about just how white it is. Many people say it's a financial impediment. Well, number one, there are rich Black people. And number two, it is not. It is it is an exclusive world. And if you don't see people like you in it, you don't know there's a place for people like you. But in my book, I try to say Black people have always been part of the equestrian story. They've just been removed from the narrative. And I actually end up spending time with a postman named Larry Callis, who spent his life savings to make a museum called the Black Cowboy Museum. And when this pandemic has passed us, I invite people to go to Rosenberg, Texas, to his museum, because he created a shrine to cowboys who were enshrined nowhere else. With segregated rodeos, Black cowboys couldn't compete for those buckles, so they didn't end up in the Rodeo Hall of Fame. The first Black cowboy was inducted in 1989 to the Rodeo Hall of Fame, Bill Pickett, who invented the sport of bulldogging, 70 years after the dude died. So the work is ongoing, and we all have to be part of it.
Mm-hmm. Is there something, and then we'll ask the question because it looks like we have one. Is there anything that in this kind of genre, so for example, like Latino Americans, especially Mexican Americans, have a huge influence on cowboy culture, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of the ways that our saddles are formed come from Mexico.
Yeah.
Are you interested in looking at writing about more of that kind of thing and more of those cultures?
Yeah, I really want to, as Linda Cupp here points out, there's a book called The Kentucky Derby Winner about that first win. I've been thinking about writing it. I'm really, really interested in looking into the legacy of Black jockeys. Am I the right voice to tell that story? There's a lot of questions about who gets to tell what stories, which I think are problematic in the writing world right now. I do hope to delve into exactly what you're talking about.
Cool. All right, let's look at that other question.
Yeah, I think, Cynthia, that's a great question. Especially as a journalist, you have to have really journalistic distance. And something I often say to people, in order for the reader to know that you're capable of being fair. I often say to people, I make a very clear line. I'm a journalist, not an advocate. So even when I'm writing about something that is a known wrong, I have to be very careful. I can't say so-and-so is a jerk. That's why I'm writing about it. So-and-so is wrong and wrongs need to be righted. And I have to be very careful in order to maintain, journalistic objectivity. But I do have a sort of subject matter expertise in writing. So that's also an asset. But like I said with the George Morris piece, I had to really question myself. Was I pulling punches because I want to spare this sport that I love so much? Or was I really able to be a credible journalist? And I ultimately decided that I could be fair and accurate by presenting the facts in that case.
Gosh, that was a fantastic question, Cynthia. And then what is some of the things that you are most excited about 2021? What is the thing you're looking forward to?
I don't know.
Future. Yeah, right? I just kind of want to knock on some wood, be like,
yeah. My little dog here, if you can see upside down here. Buddy, wake up. Come on. No, he's too asleep. Out. I don't know. He's great. I'm excited. I have a new horse, Astro. Unfortunately, my AO prospect was injured, so he's rehabbing. So I have Astro. I'm excited about moving up to the 3-6 with him. What else? I'm excited about continuing my Rumspringa. Melissa Murphy-Raffano says I should try team penning, and she wants to be my teammate. Absolutely. Melissa runs a really awesome equestrian experience. That is another thing I want to participate in 2021 called the Equitreat, EQ retreat. And maybe we could put it in the chat if you want to look it up. It is a holistic weekend for riders where she has everything from wine tastings in the barn to a spiritual reader for your horses to photo shoots with your horse. And what I really love about the Equitreat that she's created is that it's not all about riding and demanding perfection and training. It's about being with your horse. So Melissa hosts those and will host more as the pandemic loosens its stranglehold on us. And maybe we can put a link to her thing there. But yeah, I'm excited to experience more horses. They always take me on journeys. They're the only thing that redeemed 2020 for me, that's for sure.
I know one of my favorite scenes in the book is you riding the Marwaris in India, and you looking back at the guy going, "You want to go faster?"
Yeah.
Can you describe that for us? That was such a cool scene.
Sure. So actually, Marwaris are an indigenous horse from India, and if you see here, it's on the cover. This is a Marwari stallion named Nazrana, who actually just passed away. Look there, the Horse Network just put a link to an article about Melissa's product. So I rode one in Rajasthan, and as you say, through a marble ravine with a cavalry officer. Should I read that section? It's like 3 paragraphs. Should I read it?
Sure, go for it. Do you have it marked?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite to read because I feel like it best conveys what it's like to rip through the atmosphere on a horse. I do have it marked. Okay, so this is when I sit on the Marwari. The Marwari galloped at an impossible speed, bunching and coiling underneath me. The brown and white stallion was a blur. Every few seconds, the earth dropped beneath us, and the undulating trail ripped through the pulverized rock of the quarry and dipped and rose and rippled. My horse's body billowed and constricted with every oscillation of the terrain. I should mention the officer spoke one word of English, which was gallop. In front of us, the black horse's hooves of the officer flicked in and out of the dust, flaring up behind the stallion before us. The air was loud with the rat-a-tat clatter of hooves on unmined marble, then a rumbling of distant thunder when they hit soft, packed dirt. The officer darted back a glance over his shoulder as we careened down a slope, and I realized he was checking to see if I was still on. By divine grace, somehow I was. Then he went faster. The breath knocked out of me as my stallion whipped through the hot air. He was going too fast for me to inhale, blasting into the air so that it compressed and felt almost solid, too thick to gasp. Tears from the wind of our flight streamed from my eyes. The flesh of my cheeks flattened against the pressure as the stallion tore into the atmosphere. Then he went faster. At the edge of a green marble ravine, the officer pulled up, and my horse dropped from flight to an easy walk without the hint of a jolt. The man pulled a beat-up flask of water from a saddlebag and reached across the space between his perspiring black horse and my sweating painted one to pass it to me. I spilled some out on the fur to cool my horse's shoulders before taking a deep glug. The officer grinned at me then, and I saw in his face the democratizing effect of a shared passion. Worlds apart, in the saddle we were peers. "Gallop!" he said, through a robust guffaw, mimicking me, and the word echoed across the green marble mine as we laughed together. I peered through that heart-shaped gap in the world above my stallion's mane as we stood on the edge of the marble crater. We four were silent then, the officer and me full of the ecstasy of a horse's pure power, loaned to us mere mortals for moments we hope will never end. Holding his red beret to his head with one hand, the officer tipped back the canteen to his lips. The water ran from both ends of his white mustache to rain on the exquisite horse beneath him. Neither minded at all.
Oh yeah, thank you, Sarah. I actually have two questions about this. So the first question, are Marwaris big? This is a nerdy question, but yeah.
So they have a very variant phenotype, and it's really interesting. There have been a lot of people attempting to create a stud book, and with a stud book, you need a specific description of what it is, and they really can't. There's a great National Geographic article on the attempt for them to create a stud book in this big symposium, and people are like, it's kind of big, and then other people are, well, it's kind of small, and it's also like very like sturdy, and I was like, well, it's also refined. It's like, and they come up with no.
Yeah.
The really remarkable thing about them is they have curlicue ears that meet like this at the top of their head, and everything is better with a curlicue, right? Like a curly fries, pig's tails, so just a horse with curlicue ears is much better. But they have been, I describe in the book, the war brides of every conquering army. So depending on where you are in India, they have different phenotypes. So they're stouter, where the Mongolians invaded and bred them with those mountain steppe horses, and they're fleeter and finer, where the English invaders and colonists bred them with English thoroughbreds. So they really vary depending on where they are. So the answer is, I don't know, they have curly ears.
Yeah, because I remember seeing the ones at the Kentucky Horse Park, and I'm like, oh, those are littler than I thought they'd be.
Yeah,
they were super cute, but I was just kind of surprised. I was picturing because the one in the Far Pavilions, which is an old novel, is like described as this monster. Like
they can be. The one at the Kentucky Horse Park is owned by the woman who owns this one. She donated him.
Also, what a paradise! A Marwari farm on Martha's Vineyard. Heck yes.
Yeah, so I became obsessed with them when I came back to America, and I wanted one of my own. But it turns out you can't import them. The Indian government considers them a rare commodity and forbade the export of them. I think after it's 2006, I might have that wrong. And lo and behold, there's still a woman who has a dozen of them on Martha's Vineyard, and I had to figure out how. So I called her up, and she said, "Come down and spend the weekend with me." And she has a dozen of them. Her name is Francesca Kelly, and she is an English socialite who 20 years ago, her husband took her on a horse safari across India, and she, like me, fell in love with the Marwari. And she has come back every year for the past 2 or 3 decades, 5 times a year, to buy horses that she can't export and to cultivate the breed. And she's one of the people responsible for trying to make a stud book, because after the English colonists came in, they said everything English is better, your local heritage is garbage, and convinced the Indians that the Marwari was a native cur. So they kind of disbanded the breeding of them, and she felt that was dangerous for the horse. So she's been going back and cultivating it. But after she exported a couple, they locked down the exports. They felt her involvement actually was going to create a run on these horses and deplete this natural resource from India. But yet, on her island, Gretchen, there are many more horses than what she exported. And yes, she has a stallion, but there are new bloodlines. How is that possible? So it turns out Francesca Kelly has been smuggling rare Marwari semen from India to create this illicit herd that lives on Martha's Vineyard. And so as I sat with this mind-boggling woman, I mean, she's the definition of horse crazy, I said to her, journalist, our job is why, right? Our job is, the sum total of my job description is to find out the why. And here she told me the how, smuggling the semen, and she told me the what, creating the stud book, but I didn't get to the why. Why did this British lady become like the self-appointed steward of Marwari horses? And she said to me, Sarah, you come up with tremendous adventure when you're engaging in tremendous duplicity. And I was like, sorry, what? And it turns out that lady has been flying back to India 5 times a year for the past several decades. Yes, to cultivate the breed, but to also cultivate her love affair with the original safari guide that she met on that first trip with her husband.
Oh, naughty.
And that has been, she said, of course, it's a love story that involves horses, but it's never just about horses. And that could be the tagline for the whole book.
Yeah. It's never just about horses is a really good line. Yeah. So you've ridden Marwaris, you fox hunt, you jump regularly, you've ridden side saddle, you've ridden a giant, very grumpy Belgian in Central Park. When you
the parks enforcement officer.
Yeah. You what was the other one that I was thinking about this morning? Oh, you read trail rides in the Hamptons.
Yes, I was a beach cowgirl.
So what? List me a few more. Is a trip to Mongolia in your future? Are you gonna go ride Icelandics in Iceland?
I gotta ride
with the gauchos in Argentina. Like, what's the plan?
I think I gotta ride an Icelandic for sure. Joan Reinbold said she loved Horse Crazy. Thank you, Joan. Just looking at your comment, I appreciate it. Let's get some more questions going. We have a few more minutes, I think. I would love to be present at the birth of a horse. I don't think it's all about riding. Watching, I swam with the Chincoteague ponies, the wild horses of Assateague, as they were corralled. And I didn't ride a single one, but that was incredibly moving, watching 150 horses churn through the water, as ethically complex as that situation is down there. It was still very powerful. But I think I would love to have experiences with horses that have nothing to do with riding them or using them for my enjoyment. I would very, very much love to see a foal be born and understand what it takes to make my favorite creature in the world.
It is magical. I hope we can make that happen for you, Sarah. I've been there for 4.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, there was I remember like they're describing it being magical, and there's a line in the James Herriot books where he talks about his own children being born and how he like sees his baby and he's kind of like, because like when a baby horse is born, it just stands up and it magically has a personality. And I'm like, man, if human babies came out like that, I might be more interested.
Yeah. But I used to have tons of animals. I'm not just horse crazy, I'm just animal crazy. And I had a rat, and she had 9 babies one day, and they were just pink little grubs. And I had expected a million adorable rats. And by the way, rats are very adorable. They're not gross. But I had to wait for my rats to become rats. I remember they look like little thumbs. They're awesome.
Yeah, and also like horse birth when it goes right is super smooth. Like it's just like, and you're done, and you're just like, whoa, okay. Like
what's really fun is there's a whole Instagram thing, especially in the spring. You can find it when it's foaling season. That people do foal cameras that you can check on and see them live. And I was really addicted to foal cams. I just love them.
Yeah. Well, I think you need to experience foal watch too, like the nights where you stay up and you stare and you hope.
Yeah. I think we have a question from Cynthia Finlay. Have you written about Mustangs in the U.S. and their whole ... situation? I'm going to read into your ... situation, Cynthia, that you think it's a mess, because it is a mess. I actually originally included some beginning of a chapter on that controversy. There's no such thing as a wild horse, and with very limited exclusion, which is the Przewalski's wild horse in Mongolia. But every other horse is feral. And really interestingly, about 10,000 years ago, horses went extinct in the United States. They don't know what it was. And I have a chapter really trying to understand that with scientists in the book Horse Crazy. they're not. They were reintroduced by Spanish conquistadors in the 1400s, and we think of them as part of America's soul, but they're they're as foreign as tea is to Britain, right? Tea doesn't grow anywhere in Britain; it grows in the Empire. So it's funny to think of something as so English, but it's not English at all. But horses are like that, and I took out the book because the chapter from the book because I thought it would create such. I have a controversial thought about it, which is that we have spent many thousands of years developing a horse to be very, very useful for us and not useful for itself, right? They're 1,200 pounds on femurs as big as a human femur. They are not wild creatures. And I think we owe them an ethic of care because we really manufactured them in our own design and for our own purposes. And the fantasy of wild horses is that they're somehow meant to be out there, is misunderstanding what we've done to them. And I had some thoughts on that, but I really thought it would create a controversy where there needed to be a conversation. And I think that, God, that's a good line. Should we do that?
Yeah, you need that, Sarah. You're just going to just roll down real quick.
Conversation. And I thought the forum to discuss that would be after the book with people like Cynthia and like with you to try to understand those, as she says, the intersections between people and feral horses in the U.S. So I didn't include it in the book with intention.
I think that's a fantastic question to end on, too. Just in case we'll give it a couple more minutes, just in case anybody has one last question or two. But I think my last question for the night is really going to be about that. So for me, horses have really been this intersection place where I can often find common ground with people who disagree with me about many, many other things. And it creates that space of conversation versus controversy. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes if you bring up, all kinds of things, horse people have very distinct feelings about things. Mm-hmm. So what do you think? How do you think horses can facilitate conversation?
Well, I'll go back to Monty Roberts. He says horses demand one thing of us, which is that we're their safe place to be. They don't see color. They don't care about that we dress them in, cashmere and what the things we put around them and around their world, the trappings of our own. And so in that way, horses are deeply democratic. And I think they're tremendously accessible. I'm on the board of a charity called Gallop NYC. I haven't mentioned this yet, have I?
Mm-hmm. No, you have. Yeah, you mentioned it just briefly.
Oh, briefly, sorry. And what's really amazing about that is, when you see that they're in New York City, they do 500 lessons a week. It would be great if we could share a link, gallopnyc.org, for people to take a look at. When you see, it's kind of, if you build it, they will come, right? That they've made riding accessible for people who are disabled, for people who are from the inner city, and you see them out there and they are riders just like you, just like me, just like our viewers, because you give them access to these horses. And in that way, horses are a tabula rasa that we can write our own stories on. They're a blank slate that they give us so much, and I think they give us that more than anything else. And that's what I tried to convey in Horse Crazy. It doesn't just say the story of a woman in love with an animal. It's a woman and a world in love with an animal. And just like that piece I read for you, the officer and I spoke only one word together, which was the word gallop. But we clearly shared a language.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah. It has been an absolute pleasure having you. We've also included a link to where you can get her book that we should probably put in the comments.
I should mention, Gretchen, that place in the link, Bravo's Book Nook, it's actually a local bookshop near me, and I'm able to autograph every copy purchased there. So I think that's a fun treat, that you shop local, which we all need to do during this crazy time to support local businesses. And since it's next door to me, I can sign all your books.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you so much, Horse Network. And thank you so much, Equishopper, for sponsoring. And we'll see you next month. Thank you, Sarah.
You did a great job, Gretchen. Thanks for the great questions.
Thank you.